The courtroom is already buzzing when it happens. A low murmur hangs in the air, the kind that comes before something breaks. Phones are half-raised, not officially allowed, but no one wants to miss this. Judge Frank Caprio is mid-sentence.com as always, voice steady when she cuts him off. The mayor's daughter. Young, polished, unbothered. Her interruption is sharp, rehearsed, dripping with confidence that assumes the room belongs to her. She doesn't ask permission to speak. She doesn't apologize. She challenges him, publicly, loud enough for the cameras, clear enough for the record. She invokes her father without saying his name, leaning on power everyone understands. Her tone says, this isn't a courtroom, it's a negotiation, or a warning. A ripple moves through the benches. Someone inhales too loudly. Someone else freezes with their phone still recording. This is the moment people later rewind, clip, and argue about online. Because Judge Caprio stops talking. He doesn't interrupt back. He doesn't scold her. He simply pauses. The silence stretches longer than comfort allows. Long enough for confidence to wobble. Long enough for arrogance to realize it may have miscalculated. In that quiet, the power dynamic begins to tilt. Not dramatically, not yet, but unmistakably. Everyone senses it. This isn't just a case anymore. This is a line being crossed. And once crossed, there's no stepping back. History was about to be rewritten. But to understand why this moment stunned the entire courtroom, you have to know how it all began. For years, Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom had been more than a place of lit, was a mirror held up to the soul of the city. People came here not just to face their mistakes, but to see whether justice still had a heartbeat. In a world where the powerful often slip through cracks big enough to drive a limousine through, this small Rhode Island courtroom stood as something rare, a place where fairness still felt possible, but outside those walls, frustration was boiling. Across the country, headlines blurred together, politicians caught in scandals walking free. Connected families bending rules the rest of the country had to obey. Ordinary people watched, powerless, as connections replaced accountability. Every story of privilege, unchecked, chipped away at public trust, leaving a quiet, simmering anger beneath the surface. That's what made this case different. It wasn't about a parking ticket or a missed fine, it was about principle. When the mayor's daughter walked in that morning, she didn't just carry her own name. She carried every symbol of the immunity that people were sick of seeing. Every smirk, every dismissive tone, every reference to her father's influence pressed against something fragile and sacred. The belief that everyone is equal before the law. The cameras caught it. The audience felt it. This was no longer a routine. Here in it was a showdown between entitlement and integrity. The room seemed to vibrate with meaning. Because deep down, every person watching wanted to know one thing. Would justice still stand its ground? And standing at the center of this tension was someone who had never been told no. She grew up in rooms where doors opened before she knocked. From an early age, authority felt negotiable, rules flexible, consequences optional. Her last name carried weight, and everyone around her knew it. Teachers softened their tone. Officers hesitated. Clerks smiled a little too quickly. Over time, that pattern hardened into expectation. She didn't see it as privilege. She saw it as normal. She learned how to speak with confidence before she learned how to listen. How to challenge without understanding. How to wear independence like a badge, while quietly relying on the safety net beneath her feet. In public, she framed herself as self-made, outspoken, fearless, but the moment resistance appeared, the shield came up. A reference here. A reminder there. Never explicit, never crude just enough to signal that she wasn't like everyone else. Her world rewarded this behavior. Push back and people retreated. Question authority and someone higher up smoothed things over. Each small victory reinforced the lesson that pressure worked, that insistence paid off. Accountability, when it appeared, was brief and easily negotiated away. She internalized the idea that confidence could substitute for responsibility, that posture could replace principle. In time, this hardened into instinct. She spoke first and listened later. She assumed disagreement was disrespect. She treated boundaries as suggestions. Every unchecked moment shaped a personality that mistook attention for authority and influence for immunity. Leaving little room for humility or reflection in the courtroom, that mindset revealed itself in fragments. The way she leaned back instead of forward, the way her eyes drifted when others spoke, the casual interruption that assumed she would be indulged. Her tone wasn't angry. It was dismissive, as if the process itself was beneath her. This wasn't rage. It was comfort, the kind that comes from never being seriously challenged. Viewers recognized it instantly. They had seen it at work, at school, at traffic stops. The confident defiance that only exists when someone believes the system will bend for them. It stirred a familiar frustration, not because she was loud, but because she was certain. Certain that consequences were for other people. Certain that the rules would eventually adjust to her reality. What made it unsettling wasn't cruelty or malice. It was the absence of doubt, the belief that accountability was negotiable if your name was important enough. That posture, calm, assured, untouchable, was the true provocation. Because it reflected a deeper inequality people had lived with their whole lives. One that rarely faced daylight, challenge, or meaningful resistance. And yet, for all the confidence she projected, there was a fragility underneath. The kind that appears when power is assumed, not earned. When respect is expected, not built. She had never needed to test herself against an immovable force, or sit with the discomfort of being truly accountable in public. On record, and without protection, consequences, or escape. That test was coming. For the first time ever, but across the bench sat a man who had spent his life confronting power without flinching. Frank Caprio's story begins far from marble courtrooms and polished gavel strikes. Born to immigrant parents, he grew up in a cramped apartment where every penny was accounted for. Every meal earned, and every opportunity hard won. His father labored long hours. His mother worked tirelessly to hold the family together. From them, he learned lessons that would shape more than just his future career. Resilience, dignity, and the quiet power of patience. He saw the world through the lens of struggle and empathy. To him, a person's misstep was never just a legal matter. It was often the reflection of circumstance, fear, or lack of guidance. While other judges might have wielded authority as a weapon, Caprio treated it as a tool of understanding. His courtroom became a place where humanity mattered as much as law, where fairness was not measured in sentences, but in the chance given to learn, correct, and move forward in school. He was observant rather than boastful, curious rather than confrontational. He witnessed inequity firsthand, not as a statistic, but as neighbors and friends grappling with challenges far beyond their control. These early lessons informed his philosophy. Authority is strongest when tempered by compassion, and justice is most credible when it is patient, thoughtful, and unwavering in principle. As a young lawyer and later a judge, he earned a reputation not through intimidation, but through integrity. People trusted him, not because they feared him, but because they knew he would see their humanity, even in their failings. And in a world where arrogance often masquerades as strength, that calm, unshakable fairness became his quiet power. The more others sought to bully, flaunt, or manipulate, the more dangerous his restraint became because it revealed their weaknesses without him needing to raise his voice, scold, or perform. He learned early that stillness carries weight, a pause, a measured gaze. A deliberate choice of words, these could dismantle posturing far more effectively than shouting ever could. Those who relied on intimidation often found themselves exposed when confronted with someone who understood the value of quiet authority. It was a skill born of experience, patience, and a life lived observing human frailty and potential side by side. Caprio's empathy was not soft. It was strategic, rooted in the belief that people respond to respect, and that justice, when combined with dignity, has a permanence that fear never can. Every ruling, every glance, every calm intervention reflected decades of observing the consequences of entitlement, power, and unchecked influence. And so, The courtroom he presided over became more than a stage for loot, became a crucible for character. Where privilege and arrogance were met with the immovable force of fairness, he understood the stakes, both personal and public. He knew that when power is abused, society watches. When arrogance faces patience and principle, the imbalance becomes visible. And that visibility, often subtle at first, had the power to ignite accountability far beyond the room's walls. So when the challenge finally came, he didn't react the way anyone expected. The courtroom seemed to shrink as she leaned back in her chair, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Every interruption was deliberate, each question sharpened with the precision of someone used to being obeyed. She rolled her eyes when Judge Caprio asked for order, a small gesture, but enough to make the air thicken with tension. The room held its collective breath. The bailiff shifted nervously, hands brushing against the polished wood of the desk, as if seeking purchase in the growing unease. Spectators leaned forward, phones raised, capturing each flicker of expression. Cameras whirred, lenses framing the subtle war unfolding between experience and entitlement. Every pause she took, every dismissive glance, amplified the sense that the balance of authority was being tested. The mayor, seated at the back, stiffened, a flash of recognition crossing his face. Control long assumed, long expected was slipping. The calculated confidence his daughter relied on no longer seemed absolute. He realized, perhaps too late, that the courtroom was not an extension of City Hall, and power here required more than a name. Meanwhile, Judge Caprio remained still. His calm was palpable, a steady anchor against the rising storm. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't meet provocation with provocation. Each word he spoke was deliberate, measured, a subtle assertion that the courtroom answered to principle, not pedigree. The contrast was stark, her energy chaotic and performative. His composed and unyielding, spectators began to whisper among themselves, the murmurs threading through the tension, reflecting disbelief, anticipation, and a growing sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The room seemed to vibrate with anticipation, every eye fixed on the silent tension between arrogance and authority. And yet, despite her confidence, cracks were forming, almost imperceptibly. Every interruption, every challenge seemed only to underline her miscalculation. The audience felt it viscerally, the shift from control to exposure, from presumption to accountability. Then Judge Caprio said one sentence, and everything changed. Judge Caprio's eyes met hers, steady, unblinking, conveying a quiet authority that filled the room more than any words could. The air seemed to settle around him, tension bristling like electricity, drawing attention to the invisible boundary between entitlement and justice. She had expected confrontation, perhaps sharpness, maybe even impatience. What she did not anticipate was calm so measured it unsettled her, stillness that demanded attention more than any shout could have. He began with the facts, reciting the case with meticulous precision. No exaggeration, no embellishment, no flourish. Just the reality of the record, the violations, the missed obligations, the inconsistencies in her story. Every point he made was undeniable, each carefully chosen to highlight truth over posturing. He did not speak to shame her, did not wag a finger or scold. He simply articulated reality, each statement a subtle mirror reflecting back her assumptions of immunity. The courtroom hung on every word. Even the habitual murmurs of spectators faded into silence, replaced by the weight of clarity and principle. As he spoke, he drew gentle contrasts, not as attacks, but as revelations. "It is not the office of your father that determines judgment here," he said, his voice soft yet firm. "It is the law, impartial and constant, and your actions weighed fairly against it." The words were simple, yet precise, stripping away the foundation of her confidence, piece by piece. She shifted in her seat, the faintest flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, unnoticed by all but the most attentive observers. He paused briefly, allowing the weight of his statements to settle. In that pause, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The tension, previously sharp and chaotic, transformed into a stillness heavy with anticipation. Phones recorded silently, capturing every nuance, The careful way her posture faltered, the subtle narrowing of her eyes, the micro-reactions that betrayed discomfort even as she tried to maintain composure. Spectators leaned forward instinctively, sensing the reversal of power before it fully materialized. Then he spoke again, this time framing the broader principle: no name, no title, no influence follows you into this courtroom. Here, respect is earned by action, and accountability is universal. The statement, calm and declarative, carried more force than any raised voice could. It was not just a declaration to her, but a reminder to the audience, a reinforcement that justice is impartial, and integrity unassailable. He moved through her arguments methodically, exposing contradictions with surgical precision. Each claim she made, each justification, was met not with derision, but with a quiet dismantling that left her reasoning exposed. The subtle contradictions she had relied on to bolster her confidence now lay bare, revealing gaps in logic, inconsistencies, and assumptions rooted in privilege rather than principle. With each point, her composure faltered further, though she tried to mask it with practiced gestures and rehearsed expressions. The spectators' reactions mirrored the unfolding transformation. Whispered affirmations, gasps, the soft click of phone cameras all became part of the rhythm of accountability being realized in real time. People felt vindicated, as though a wrong long endured had finally been addressed. Social instincts engaged, empathy aligned with justice, and admiration for the judge deepened. His restraint, patience, and moral clarity elevated the confrontation beyond a simple legal proceeding. It became a lesson in dignity, fairness, and the quiet power of principled action. By the time he concluded, she sat with a rare stillness. Not arrogance, not defiance, not rehearsed confidence. Just awareness and understanding that the rules applied to her as they did to everyone else, and that no external influence could override that truth. Caprio's voice, calm and deliberate, had achieved what bluster and entitlement could not: clarity, accountability, and moral authority. As the courtroom processed the reversal, he added one final statement, soft but resonant. The measure of a person is not the shield of a name, but the weight of their actions. The words echoed, imprinting on every observer, reinforcing a sense of justice fulfilled. Even the mayor, watching from the back, felt the shift, his daughter's assumed protection rendered meaningless, replaced by the immutable principle that had guided this courtroom for decades. The impact reverberated outward. Spectators, visitors, and the legal staff absorbed the demonstration of calm power, moral clarity, and reasoned authority. Phones captured the sequence not as a courtroom scene, but as a moment of accountability, destined to travel beyond these walls. The quiet dismantling of arrogance, performed with dignity and restraint, created an emotional payoff that was immediate, profound, and unforgettable. Every subtle gesture, every carefully measured word had combined to produce a reversal so complete that it left the audience in awe. The courtroom was no longer a stage for entitlement. It was a testament to principle, patience, and the transformative force of respect applied consistently. People left with more than a story, they left with validation, a sense that justice can prevail, and a reminder that integrity carries a weight that privilege cannot override. But what happened after the hearing ended spread far beyond the courtroom walls. The moment the courtroom emptied, the ripple became a wave. Phones recorded every frame, clips uploaded within minutes, hashtags forming almost instantly. Hashtag justice for all. Hashtag dignity over privilege. Hashtag Judge Caprio. The sound bites traveled faster than anyone could have anticipated, carrying with them the weight of what had just transpired, a young woman's assumed immunity dismantled with calm authority. A reminder that no title, no connection could override principle. Social media feeds erupted. People from cities hundreds of miles away watched, replayed, and shared. Commentary poured in, admiration, shock, even relief. Finally, one user wrote, "Someone held power accountable without theatrics." Ordinary citizens recognized themselves in the quiet dignity of the judge, the struggle for fairness, the battle against entitlement. the hope that integrity still mattered in a world that often rewarded bluster over principle. News outlets picked up the story. Analysts debated the subtle brilliance of Caprio's approach, how restraint and reason could outperform aggression and privilege. Opinion pieces highlighted the cultural significance. Framing the event as more than a courtroom moment, it was a symbol of societal longing for accountability and respect. Clips went viral, shared not just for the drama, but for the lesson embedded in every carefully chosen word and deliberate pause. Even skeptics found themselves pausing. Critics who might have dismissed the story initially felt the weight of public reaction. The undeniable power of calm authority executed flawlessly. The mayor, usually quick to respond, remained silent. His influence unable to alter the narrative unfolding across feeds, timelines, and comment threads. Silence became louder than any statement he could have issued. Among viewers, the emotional resonance was immediate. People felt validation, a sense of shared justice. Those who had endured minor slights or systemic inequities recognized themselves in the narrative. The clips offered catharsis, a reminder that dignity can confront arrogance, that patience and principle are potent forms of resistance, and that societal rules still hold weight when applied consistently. Memes began to appear, mixing levity with admiration. Social media users highlighted the judge's calm gaze, the subtle collapse of the mayor's daughter's confidence, the precise dismantling of entitlement. Every share carried both humor and moral clarity, encouraging broader discussion. People felt connected, as though they had witnessed not just a courtroom, but a cultural reckoning that affirmed their own values. The effect was cumulative. Ordinary citizens, commentators, and influencers alike contributed to a growing chorus. Integrity had won, arrogance had faltered. And the example set by Caprio had extended far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Public sentiment surged, reinforcing that accountability is not abstract. It resonates personally, socially, and morally. And then came the moment no one expected. From Judge Caprio himself. Judge Caprio looked across the emptying courtroom. His gaze steady, not triumphant, not vindictive, but deliberate. The spectacle of confrontation had passed, yet he understood the deeper lesson embedded in every reaction. Every subtle shift of posture, every faltering glance. Justice, he knew, was not measured by who trembled under authority, but by the fairness with which it is applied. He spoke quietly, yet with a resonance that carried beyond the walls. Respect, he said, is not inherited. It is earned. Power is never permanent, and entitlement does not grant immunity. Dignity is a choice we make, in every action, every decision, and every interaction. The words were simple, but their weight settled like a quiet echo in the minds of all who had witnessed the events. They reframed the confrontation from a personal clash into a universal principle, a reminder that integrity surpasses position, and humility outweighs privilege. Caprio emphasized accountability, not punishment. He did not frame her misstep as humiliation to be savored, but as a lesson to be understood. Justice without cruelty, fairness without vengeance, these were the pillars he elevated, demonstrating that true authority lies in balance, compassion, and unshakable principle. Each syllable reinforced the idea that moral clarity is stronger than fear, and that a calm, thoughtful response to arrogance teaches far more than anger ever could. The audience, though no longer physically present, absorbed the lesson through screens, headlines, and shared clips. Ordinary citizens felt affirmation in their own struggles, seeing the reflection of their belief in fairness and integrity magnified by the judge's restraint. They recognized that dignity could confront entitlement, and that ethical strength does not demand aggression to be effective. By reframing the entire episode as a moral teaching, Caprio transformed a moment of conflict into one of inspiration. It was no longer simply a courtroom event. It had become a cultural touchstone, a reminder that every individual, regardless of status or name, is accountable to the same standards. The story became an affirmation of values that transcend the personal, reaching into collective consciousness, inspiring reflection and commitment to principles that matter. Which brings us back to the question at the heart of this story. The courtroom may have emptied, but the lesson lingered far beyond its walls. From the opening clash to the quiet dismantling of entitlement, the story had revealed something timeless. True authority does not raise its voice. True justice does not rely on intimidation. It moves steadily, unwavering, guided by principle and tempered by humanity. As you reflect on what unfolded, consider the power of restraint, clarity, and fairness in your own life. Moments of confrontation, whether large or small, are opportunities to choose dignity over reaction, principle over impulse, and calm over chaos. The story of Judge Caprio and the mayor's daughter is more than drama. It is a blueprint for how integrity can prevail in the face of arrogance and privilege. Share this story with others. Let it spark conversation, reflection, and debate. Engage not just as an observer, but as someone committed to reinforcing the values of fairness, accountability, and respect in your community. Every share, every discussion, every acknowledgement of these principles strengthens the idea that justice is not abstract, it is lived, demonstrated, and defended collectively. Remember that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it waits, observes, and acts with precision, letting truth speak louder than entitlement ever could. By embracing these lessons, you participate in a culture that rewards dignity, expects accountability, and honors the quiet power of moral clarity. Take this moment to reflect, to act, and to carry the principles you have witnessed forward. Let the story remind you that influence is earned, respect is chosen, and integrity endures when it is upheld consistently. In doing so, you become part of a community that values justice, inspires accountability, and believes in the transformative power of calm authority. Engage, share, and uphold these principles. Be part of the movement that chooses dignity over spectacle, fairness over favoritism, and humanity over hubris.